Welcome to Conflict Managed. I'm your host, Mary Brown. Conflict Managed is a weekly podcast about toxic work environments and how to fix them. We're glad you're here. Good morning, Jess, and welcome to Conflict Managed.
Hi, good afternoon here in the UK.
That's right. There's a bit of a time difference between the two of us. And so I'm so happy to be talking with you today and talking about the work that you do and your very interesting book, because I think the super helper syndrome is probably what I'm trying to recover from. But you've got a lot going on. And before we get to that, I want to hear about the first job you ever had as a young person.
First job, well, babysitting was my first job, my first paid job, aged maybe 12, 13. I was a very responsible young person. And I was always told that, like, you're wiser than your years or you're older than your years. Um, and and so yeah, looking after other people's children. There was one particular family who I bonded with over the years, just keep going on and on. Yeah. Easy for me, it was easy work.
That's interesting. I think some people are told that when they're a young person, being wise beyond your years. Did you think, yeah, I've got it a little bit more together than my peers, or did that sort of bounce off of you, or did that really resonate with you?
Oh, how do I answer that without sounding like a twat? I think, excuse my language, but I think I did know. I grew up as a parentified child, so I was expected to take on more responsibility around the house and emotionally than my peers were. So I think from a very young age that had shaped me. I also grew up with a fantastic childminder of my own. So when I was 4, um, Jean Leach, who I actually dedicated the book to, you mentioned that. As a childminder, she then became known as Auntie Jean, and she was my guardian angel. So from age 4 to just a couple of years ago until she passed away, um, she was a role model for me. So I grew up in a household full of other kids. So babysitting and taking on responsibility for children really felt natural to me anyway.
Mm. Well, that's wonderful to have a mentor from such a young age. Would you consider her a mentor
Mm.
of sorts?
Yeah, oh, most definitely. She was a confidant, a guardian angel, a rescuer, super helper, to so many people and to so many, not just children, but in her whole community. When I look back and think about, I used to go on holiday with her in the summer, and thankfully her family kind of adopted me as part of their family. She had 2 children. But it was, her role was always to give. She was the overgiver in the community, wherever she was, and she did that with delight. She had a massive heart.
Mm. Oh, how wonderful to be in her orbit is when we find those people who see us and invest in us, right, to give us that confidence and go out and to do what it is that we
Yeah.
do. So you babysat, you probably did a few other jobs, and you end up in university.
That's right. Yeah. Eventually, I heard about this when I was about 15. I heard about this thing called a gap year.
Mhm.
I got very excited about the idea of taking a gap year, which is one of the reasons why I carried on working, not just babysitting, but loads of other jobs throughout my whole teenage years. It was really important for me to kind of travel and see the world before settling down what I thought I was going to be doing into a career in psychology. So I wanted to be a psychologist since the age of 12.
Mm.
Another reason to babysit and kind of spend time observing these children, and kind of, playing pseudo psychologist with them. But I took a gap year, traveled. It wasn't a year. I traveled and worked for 2 years abroad, came back, went to university, chose a really beautiful location, and yeah, had a lot of fun. I think maybe too much fun, but I certainly came out with a full understanding that psychology was still for me. That was the important thing. I wanted to test that. So obviously as a 12-year-old, you have really no idea. Um, yeah, so I went up to university in North Wales, and now I live in Mid Wales, actually, just relocated here a year ago.
The gap year, I think from a parent's point of view, of course, depends on so many things, but it can feel a little bit frightening. Like they're going to take a year off and then life will happen, or then they won't go to their studies. And so they won't fulfill whatever potential they have. And from my perspective, there's so many students sitting in university classes that shouldn't be there at that point in their life. They need something else. They need some other kind of experience. They need to be out of school and in quote unquote the real world for a little while, or having these wonderful experiences that you take your whole life and actually helps you be a better student, have a different kind of perspective. And as you said, knowing or thinking that you wanted to be a psychologist from such a young age, and then coming back after having some experience away from an educational setting and realizing, yes, this is still what it is that I want to do. I've always find it fascinating to meet somebody who has known from a relatively young age what it is they want to do. So what was it about psychology, being a psychologist, that you latched onto at such a young age that you are what you do?
It's definitely linked to having a family dynamic where I felt like I could change it and I really wanted to change it and I really wanted to improve things and I wanted to have healthier relationships, but I didn't know how. And I came upon a different number of therapies, psychiatry, but I knew about that and I didn't want to. I mean, I also thought about being a vet, at some point. But at some point, I came across psychiatry. Thought, no, I don't want to medicate people. That's terrible. Um, and and I thought, what's the next thing? Well, that's talk therapy. Okay, what's psychology all about? And I didn't really want to work in the healthcare system. I really didn't imagine myself working in hospitals. Um, but you know, that was where I was going to land in clinical psychology, working with emotionally challenged children and their families. That's where I wanted to go to. So it took a few loops. So after qualifying, after getting my bachelor's, I then got experience within the healthcare service here in the UK. And the quickest way to do that is to volunteer. In those days, you could. So I found myself in various psychiatric units around the area I was living in. And I ended up working with older adults with dementia and supporting families who were struggling and going through that change. Then I ended up working in nursing homes as well as part of a research group on dementia care mapping. So although I wasn't working with children at all whatsoever, I was still supporting the person with the challenge and the social challenge of that, the dynamic in the family. So for me, it really did feel like the work I wanted to do. I wanted to help people improve their relations, and to some extent, I was able to do that, help them navigate that very difficult time in their lives.
Is it the kind of psychology you practice right now?
So a few years, it may not surprise you, a few years into this area of work, I just realized I was too sensitive,
Mm.
um, taking on so many people's emotions. I had no I had no boundaries. Today I call it the Zorb of Zen. Like, if you have you heard of the Zorb, a big plastic ball that you sit yourself into and you go rolling down a hill in the Zorb? Anyways, it's a thing. I've done it. It's really good fun. I call it the Zorb of Zen, and I put myself in my imaginary Zorb, and now I have a protective barrier. But in those days, I had no clue, and I didn't have any facilitation to help me. Although I had supervisors and clinical psychology supervisors, there wasn't such thing as this kind of practical advice of here's how not to take on too much. Whereas I think these days you probably get that. Um, so yeah, after absorbing lots of emotions and getting very um, absorbed and sometimes not obsessed by, but certainly overwhelmed by. And my mind would just fill of all these people that I couldn't help. And ultimately, dementia is something that older adults experience. And it's not something you can help them move on from. It's not something you can help them move out of. I think all of those things, and the fact that and I came to the NHS with a lot of energy and a lot of kind of that young spirit of, oh, let's change stuff, let's improve it here. And all you get is, oh, well, we tried that 10 years ago and it didn't work. Oh, no, well, we don't have any money. Or that's not the way we do things here. And I get it. I completely understand. Now I completely understand. In those days, it was very, very frustrating. And I thought I need to do plan B, which is to become a business psychologist. So I retrained in business psychology, did my master's, relocated to get that funded master's, and worked as well in academia for a few years. Ironically, as a business psychology consultant and researcher, but with the NHS. So from a very different perspective, and my experience helped me get that job. So it was beautiful in a way because it led me to help. Um, uh, well, help, I don't know, but it was useful, and the piece of work we were doing was valuable, and then it gave us some insights into how managers experience stress when they're giving too much. So there's a theme here, Mary. Observing managers and speaking to them and interviewing them and understanding what it's like to overgive, and not be the overgiver for once,
Mm.
although I probably was. But yeah, so I think that answers your question.
Yes, yes, absolutely. It's an interesting change, I think, from dementia care to going into business psychology. I mean, there are other kinds of fields you could have gone into. Why that?
Yeah, I know I could have gone into a number of different fields, but for me, that was the right one to do. I also had, I think, a sense of pressure because by then I'd been working in the NHS for almost very little money for so many years. And I was heading to, I think, age 28 when I was doing my master's. And I felt the pressure to kind of be in a field where I could actually be financially stable and secure. But also, business psychology is, as I love it now too. I'm working with a different client group. I'm working with a client group who are relatively, particularly my private coaching clients, are high achieving or want to be. They're functional. They are perhaps just dissatisfied in some areas of their life, or just wanting to improve the way they are. So kind of working their way up the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So I'm working with a different client base. It's much healthier for me from a personal perspective to work with this type of client as well. Um, and now I have a lot of different methods anyway to support me in the work that I do, and to make sure that my boundaries are healthy for everybody involved.
I really love your story, uh, in the sense that, sometimes we feel like this is the kind of profession I want to be in, but we get in it and we think this is not a right fit. But I still want to, especially in helping professions, I want to contribute in some way. And the more that you look into the world of work, there's so many different kinds of jobs and so many different ways to find your fit, right? And so sometimes people will just give up. They're like, oh, this is not for me. And of course, it may not be, but finding what resonates with who you are and being able to still achieve what it is that you want to achieve. Because when you're young, you don't always know, like, oh, this is the kind of work that I want to do. And so this is maybe the traditional avenue or the avenue that's presented itself. And you're like, oh my gosh, I'm burned out. Oh my gosh, this is overwhelming, or whatever it might be that's going on for the person. But to, as you said, have a plan B, have a variety of ways of thinking about, I want to do this kind of work, but how am I going to be most effective, which means not being burned out, not being overwhelmed, and then finding that sweet spot for yourself. When you
I
look
think
at your work career, can you tell us about a particular mentor or boss that you had that that really worked well for you, resonated with you, and maybe what specifically they did that you found helpful and impactful?
mm, um, I do. There is one particular person that comes to mind, and interestingly enough, she's from the earlier period of my life, the earlier NHS work I did. In fact, we're friends now. She comes and visits. Um, and she was a nurse manager when I was at my most energetic and, just freed from my bachelor's degree, thinking, I know so much. Um, but she was fantastic in so many ways, but I think I can distill it. Um, she had empathy at her core, not just empathy for the patients who we had coming into our community hospital, so that is families who are living in, their normal homes, but they come in for a day or two a week to get the extra medical support and also to give the families respite. So she not only had empathy for her patients and for their families, she had a huge understanding of the different personalities in our team. and she was readily able to adapt herself in a very calm fashion. She was very calm in that, and that's, I think, for me, really interesting. She never, and so she could tune in, she could adapt, not too much, not to be accommodating, but just enough to steer you or to bring the group together again. Like she was the cohesive glue. Um, she would guide us, but also, she would ask and invite suggestions and innovations. And I did actually do a few things that were quite new. So it wasn't like my hands were completely tied, but her gentle manner. I've never had any other manager quite like her. Um, and yeah, and I think empathy for herself as well. She was able to give with boundaries. She knew her place. She knew when to clock off as such. And I think she role modeled that really well. Although I didn't realize at the time, but that's what she was doing. She was really good at giving, and she was a fantastic nurse, and she was loved and adored by everybody. Not, she was never seeking that, but she was just so confident in herself, that kind of quiet power. I really admire that. I really, really do.
That resonates so much with me because one thing that I prize, and I recognize this about myself, I really prize civility. I really prize this calm, quiet power where the person, they know who they are, they know what their boundaries are, and they're able to give appropriately. And that is something that is just very meaningful to me, and I'm drawn toward that. So when I find a leader who isn't like that, I have to say, okay, Mary, this is what you were really drawn towards, and okay, but let's assess this person's merit. So I can just imagine being in that environment, especially in a fairly chaotic job, right? You've got so much going on around you. So to have your leader be that quiet, steady presence that which just gives everybody confidence to do their job and to do it well and to work cohesively as a team. What a gift to give you.
Yeah, yeah. And so, I remember her 20 something years later.
Yeah.
I remember how it was to work with her, and how it felt like to be in her team, and everybody felt respected and listened to.
Mm.
Yeah, and I've had such different experiences as well.
As they say, people remember how they feel around you, right? It's not so much what you say, but how they felt in those interactions. And yeah, that's it is so wonderful when we have colleagues, in particular bosses, where we just feel seen and we can trust them that they're steering the ship and we don't have to take on that burden like this person doesn't know what's going on or this person's got a mutiny going on or whatever it might be. But be able to then just rest in and do the work. And a lot of people have difficult work. That particular work that you're doing is really hard. And so to have a manager, a boss who has that quiet power, gosh, I love that. More quiet power bosses, I think. So we have these wonderful experiences. It's so nice to have colleagues or a boss that resonates with us. But we also everyone experiences conflict at work. Conflict is normal. Um, can you tell us about a conflict you've had either with a colleague or a boss and how you dealt with it, and maybe now how you would deal with it now? So maybe a conflict you had earlier in your life and maybe how you would deal with it differently now.
Mm. I eventually moved into management consultancy and then in-house in financial services. And this was around the time of the financial crunch, 2008 to 2010. And I was specifically brought in at a senior level. I was 28. I was brought in at the senior level for about 6 months to oversee a huge transition. In other words, people were being let go, and I was brought in to oversee some of that and support on this huge transformational project. And so I was brought in for my kind of big ideas, broad interest, expertise as a psychologist and a chartered business psychologist. I was brought in as somebody new, So sometimes, yeah, I don't know if you're aware of that, consultants will often be flown into a business to then become the scapegoat. It's like, well, it wasn't us. The managers can say, we didn't do it, it's what they said. And I knew that. I knew that too. Um, so that was going to be difficult enough. That setting was going to be challenging enough. Add to that a manager who doesn't manage, he just runs a little clique of a couple of people. And you might hear on the grapevine what you're supposed to do. So he doesn't speak to you directly. And when he does speak to you, he leans across the table and he taps your ring. I used to wear, and sometimes still do, big statement jewelry. And he tapped, he pressed my finger and he said, Jess, stop thinking big, start pressing buttons. Okay. Coupled with walking past my desk, open plan office, and squeezing a shoulder every now and then, or taking something from my desk and putting it on his desk. And there are there's a long list of just very small, strange things. And at the time, I was under pressure because I had a team of three business psychologists. So at this time, I'd moved beyond the 6 month kind of trial period, if you like, interim period. I was now a full-time member of staff. I had grown my own team of other business psychologists, three of them, and we had a lot of work to do. And we had like an 18-month remit basically to try and get a lot of things done. Um, and in short, I also felt like an imposter because I was 28. I'd been brought in at a particular level at the interview stage. They said, "Okay, well, you'll be this senior." It's like, "Okay, that's juicy." And when I started, they said, "Actually, we're having to make you this senior because it's so hierarchical here, that nobody else would speak to you or have meetings with you unless you were this senior." So I was, okay, that's fine. And here's the salary to, that's appropriate for that level. So imposter syndrome, a manager I just didn't understand, a toxic environment to a great degree. I had no idea how to handle it because I just wanted to keep my head. That time, everyone was losing their jobs, Mary. I was part of that system, unfortunately, but I didn't want to lose mine. And I certainly had to protect my team as well, three of them whose livelihoods were relying on having a job. So I cried a lot, I worked a lot. I overcompensated the imposter syndrome by doing too much, by saying yes to everybody, by spreading myself out into um, whatever direction I felt I should be. I have a lot of coaching clients. In fact, just one just came to me just now saying if he could work with me, he's been told to raise his profile, and that's that sense of I have to be saying yes to, I have to be indispensable to them. I don't want to be made redundant tomorrow. So there's a lot of fear, a lot of unsettled emotions, and a clique that I wasn't part of
Mm.
in this very small senior team. Um, and I managed that by getting out. Not, it took a couple of years to get out. I had to let go of my team. It was almost the time of the end of their contracts anyway, so that was timely. And I saw a way out to a different team with somebody who'd already seen the value that I could offer him and his team for being big sky, strategic, experienced, professional psychologist. So that was lovely. Over the Christmas period one year, it was like, bam, gone. I never have to go back to that team again. Wrote my emails, started this new job, and that was absolutely perfect. I stayed there for another year and then I just resigned because I had to get out of that setting. Um, so yeah, I mean, what would I do now differently? Oh my goodness, so much, so much. I mean, I was 28, I'm 50 this year. That was 20 years ago. It feels like yesterday still.
Mhm.
Um, I would have a quiet word. I would state how I feel on a one-to-one with one or more people and say, um, you know, I don't feel comfortable with this. I do feel comfortable with that. I need a clearer remit, or I need to know what you do expect from me because you hired me in for one thing and now you're telling me not to do that. Um, in a physical environment, this is what I do and do not stand for. This is what I will and will not put up with. Again, if that's non-negotiable, I'm out of here, but at least I've laid it on the table. I hope, I hope I would have the courage to at least try to have that conversation. Um, because it was a dizzy making environment anyway. There's so much going on all of the time, and you're
Yeah.
under pressure, and it's the financial services doing the massive credit crunch. So yeah, it was pretty tricky.
That sounds awful. I'm sorry you went through that experience. I mean, the fear that so many people live under of losing their job, which is, we want everyone to be gainfully employed. We want people to be able to feed themselves and their families and to be housed and to plan for their future, right? These are really good basic desires that we people want. And it turns out that so many jobs, so many places are unstable, right? There's this grand disloyalty from both employer to employee, and then the employees to the employer. Why should I be loyal to you? Because I could be laid off tomorrow. It's the whole world of work is obviously, is topsy-turvy right now, but that environment where you put up with so much when you are telling yourself that, this is just about anybody listening, when you're telling yourself, I need this job to pay my mortgage, right? I need to, put food on the table. And so I've got to do what has to happen. I'm going to allow things I don't like somebody tapping my ring or squeezing my shoulder. I mean, I could just visibly, I just cringed when you said that, but I
Mm,
understand that. I understand why people put up with so much that it's like the lobster in the water. It's like eventually you just reach. And I think it's so very telling that you got out of that particular environment into another one, but then you're like, I'm done. I've got to get out of here because
mm,
it becomes so overwhelming. And I also,
mm,
like you said in the beginning of this awful story, that these things were very small. And I think so many work environments are won and lost in the quote unquote very small. Because whether or not I can speak up for myself, whether or not they really want to hear what is okay or not okay, you know, or is it safe to say what my boundaries are? Is it safe to have those kinds of conversations? Do the people around me, are they receptive? Or am I going to be even further ostracized because I'm not, as you already said, in the clique, right? So there's all of these warning signs that are just clear as day about this
yeah.
is not a good place. So when you coach people today who find themselves, a lot of the people I talk to are in very bad circumstances, what are the kinds of things that kind of advice do you give people who are in
Mm,
kind of similar circumstances?
mm. It varies.
Of
It
course.
varies, but I think, and I'm not really into, so as a psychologist coach, I'm not really into giving advice as such, but I help my client have as much self-belief as I believe they deserve until they have enough self-belief to kind of carry them forward. So I believe in them. My clients generally, and I check this with them as well, okay, you say you feel like an imposter. Do you actually perform? Well, no, I'm lazy and I get rubbish reviews. Okay, well, let's work with that, shall we? But that's what they never say that, of course. They say, no, no, no,
Right.
I'm really good at my job and I'm capable. That's why I'm so frustrated that I haven't been given the promotion yet. So obviously you need to work with the client in front of you, but I think these there's a lot to be said for um I call it the king pole. So this is, shall I talk you through one of the examples? Okay, so I use a lot of visuals and obviously I use my hands a lot as well in my coaching. So I'll say, here's your king pole. If you've ever done yoga or Pilates, you'll know of your powerhouse core, your inner core, your abs. Okay, so I do this to kind of represent your core. And if you can imagine this is a king pole. Okay, so take your mind's eye to a big, beautiful red and white big top circus tent. Yeah, can you see the red and white big top circus tent? Beautiful. And it's beautiful. Okay, no animals were harmed during the making of the circus, but you've got lions, your elephants, the trapeze artist, the lion tamer cracking his whip, and everything is in flow. Everything is beautiful. But what's happened is that king pole is actually called that massive pole in the middle holding everything together just got cracks in. It's old. The storm has come and gone. It's kind of on loose ground at the bottom. And even though the tent has got guy ropes holding the canvas together and holding that tight to the ground. Any minute now, something could come along and blow that circus tent away. That is ultimately how I describe to the coaching clients how I want you to be. I want us to get that king pole. I want us to pile it down slightly deeper into the ground, foster it, maybe give it some bolsters if it needs it. Get out the filler putty, let's mend those cracks. Let's mend the damage that's been done to it because over the years whatever anyone has said to you, whatever you say to yourself, so other people have criticized you, judged you negatively, you've had this internal dialogue, the inner critic. I can speak for days about that. Um, you have this self-doubt, something particular has happened, i.e., an unhelpful manager or a horrible situation. You've had to navigate your way through. That has also destroyed your self-belief. All of these little things add up, death by a thousand paper cuts. And I think that's how I start. I said, let's just go back to basics and say, right, how can we harness and foster or cultivate a stronger sense of self-belief? And from there, everything beautiful can happen.
Mm.
So that's where I would start,
I love
because
that.
once because I'd say to my coach, she'll say, oh, I just want, just give me some things to say in my next meeting that, makes me sound confident. I was like, no, absolutely not. Because you can say, I can give you a script.
Mhm.
I can give you I can give you the best script in the world to say, to go on a Zoom call, to write on your Slack channel, to present in person. And if you don't feel it, if you don't really believe what you're saying, they won't either. And we have this spidey sense, don't we, Mary?
Mhm.
We can sense when someone is inauthentic or slightly off, or even like a good friend of ours, they're not well, but they haven't told us, but you can sense something is out. It's the same thing even with strangers. We know when someone's being inauthentic. So I'll start with the king pole and then work with them to build up that inner confidence, and then test and trial in a very small and safe way um, boundaries and what to say and how to say it and how to express yourself, how to protect your time and your energy, and how to then communicate that with others in the way that I wish I had done so 20 years ago.
I love that. It's so picturesque and it's very evocative. And as you were speaking, I was thinking about developing resilience. And I don't know if it's exactly the same thing that you're talking about, but it sounds like it to me in the sense of when I think about conflict, right? Instead of, we want to get away from just putting bandages out there, right? Because um, so many people want to deal with the conflict and then they're going to be done with it. Well, that's just not the way of conflict. Conflict is normal. The conflict isn't the problem. It's unmanaged conflict. And so how do you develop those conflict competencies so that when the conflict comes your way, you don't crumble, right? That rigid pull, but you have developed confidence um, through the habit, getting these good habits and instantiating these habits so that when it comes your way, not if, but when it comes your way, um, you don't get so blown over. You have these internal resources. You've developed your own tools to maybe deal with it earlier than you would have and a more fruitful way. And so many people that I work with are self-professed conflict avoiders. And so to develop that inner tent pole um, of resiliency so that you're not just constantly swayed with the external things coming your way.
Mm, yeah, I mean, and your work sounds fascinating. Um, do you work in a way that you help coach people to be more to have better boundaries or to advocate for themselves better?
Yeah, I'm really interested in helping people have authentic dialogue, conversations. And how do you speak up for yourself? How do you notice, first of all, that there is a problem and then prepare to have that conversation? And um, when I work, I do a lot of training with just groups of people, how to have a peer-to-peer conversation, or for managers when there's a gap in performance or behavior, how do you have it with the end goal in mind, which is at work, it's addressing the problematic behavior, what the person finds problematic, and moving forward with that relationship because you're going to see them the next day. So not just a win-lose, but how do we win together by addressing? And the sooner we address something, the sooner we notice it, and the more likely we're able to address it. Because you said death by a thousand paper cuts, when it's just the first time they touched your ring, you
Mhm.
than the hundredth time, because now you have this pattern, we've normalized this behavior. The other person is likely to get offended, like you're saying I'm doing something right. You get this whole dynamic that can be built when we allow behavior that we find personally problematic instead of having a conversation like, hey, what's going on? Some people
Mhm.
mean nothing by it because they are just more touchy-feely. Other people mean other things, but you don't know until you don't know. So a lot of that, getting personally curious and then curious about others and challenging
Yeah.
those narratives that we produce about others when we feel aggressed or we feel pain, and we don't know what to do or where to go about it. And so the book that you wrote, the Super Helper Syndrome, a survival guide for compassionate people, I'm so interested in your work. And well, tell me about the origin of this book, because I could just, a lot of listeners, a lot of people resonate because they're helpers. They want to help. And you sort of already have described what happens when you are too much in that direction. So can you tell us about the origin of the book and what the book is about?
Yeah. Thank you. Um, it's ultimately the origin. You've heard some of my backstory already, so that's part of it. Um, Initiators are my Auntie Jean, the childminder I had, and the nurse manager I had in my 20s. Um, and through my coaching practice as well, especially my private coaching practice in the last 10 years, almost every one of them, 80 to 90% of my private coaching clients would come and say, in their own way, I'm exhausted, I'm doing too much for others, I've lost a sense of who I am, and I don't like it. And it's not serving me and it's not serving anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
I have either already experienced burnout and I don't want to experience it again, or I'm on the verge of burnout, or I'm in burnout. Um, and I called her the super helper muse, but I have a super helper muse. And she was kind of playing with me and she kept saying, super helper, super helper. This person might be a super helper. What's a super helper? So, like, no, it doesn't exist as a thing. So, okay. I never described any one of my clients as a super helper, but I'd come off the Zoom call and I'd run downstairs and I'd say, because I worked in my loft office, and I'd say to my partner, who's also a psychologist, and I'd say, I've got someone who's really high in empathy again, and they're this and they're this and they're this. And it's not about disclosing information about the coaching client. I want to be very, very clear. It's about, giving a generic kind of characteristics. If you look at the Enneagram, for example, a lot of the type 2 Enneagram personality profiles and even the type 6 were coming through really strongly. They're known as the helper or the loyalist. So that theme, Mary, it just kept coming at me again and again and again, really to such a point where I thought I can't just, it's not enough for me to help just one person in a coaching setting. I need to help more people. So lo and behold, the super helper in me kicks in. And I tried to write a book, and I said to my partner who has written books and poetry and won awards, blah blah, I'll just write a book. I'll just take some time. I've got the ideas, I've got enough content. Anyway, I didn't do anything with it for 6 months. Then COVID hit, do you remember?
Mhm.
March 2020 in the UK, we hit lockdown by the end of March. And I thought this is the perfect time. Not only was I continuing to do my coaching, because I always do that online, and many of my clients are global, but I had extra free time because my corporates had stopped working with me, etc. Everything was up in the air. And I thought I'd write a book. Anyway, a few months in, my partner says, "Oh, how's the book going?" Don't ask. I haven't started. I feel terrible about that because I really want to help people and I know it's the best way. Anyway, eventually I asked for help. I mean, I don't know how good you are for asking for help, but I'm not very good at asking for help. So here I am. I asked him for help, and his brain is beautiful. He has like this systematizing brain. So we both literally sat at the same computer, and this is me typing. We typed away together, arguing over, debating every word, the tone. the voice. It had to be my. We decided it was going to be my voice. Um, and so the book came to life whilst Rod was in the philosophy and principles of psychology and looking at altruism and the very core of our beings and Dawkins and, going back to the kind of basics, like, are we naturally altruistic? Are human beings wired at all in whatsoever to want to help? How does it serve us? And kind of building up that part of the book. So that's kind of part one, where we lay some of the history on the table, but we also lay what I spent my time doing, which was interviewing people who had come to me and said, yes, I've experienced a sense that I have helped to the detriment of my own well-being. And that's what a super helper syndrome is,
Mm.
where you help to the detriment of your own well-being. You give because even though you're exhausted, you have no more time in your diary, you have no capacity, you have no energy, or that person won't even take your advice, but you'll still sit on the phone for an hour telling them or listening to them and trying to encourage them, to do the right thing for themselves. And gosh, it comes in so many different ways. So Rod and I unpacked the psychology of helping. No one's ever done that either. And then we kind of put it all back together again after poking around in the psyche. So I interviewed 50 people for the book and I could have carried on interviewing. I love qualitative data analysis. I love speaking to people. I love hearing stories. Sometimes those conversations would turn into mini coaching sessions because I'd want to put them back together again at the end of the session because what they had said was so powerful, moving, disturbing, upsetting for them. And sometimes me too. So we would have, plan in enough time to kind of regroup and settle. Um, and then, yeah, meanwhile, we found a publisher who took it on. It's now come out in 4 different languages as well as English. It's won an award. It's out in paperback. I'm pointing behind because it's in hardback and paperback and ebook. Um, yeah, and I get messages, not every day, but messages every now and then. And it'll be from someone like, I read it 2 years ago and I'm still going through it. Every time I read it, I get something different from it.
Mm.
And they see themselves. So it's helping, like, those beliefs are, I must help everyone, or I must help everyone to prove I'm a good person, or they couldn't survive without me. And this one, which is a kind of, I think, globally very common belief for most people, I don't have any needs. I have no needs. Other people's needs are a priority to my own. And so that's where you get caught in super helper syndrome, where you're no longer able to put yourself in that zorb of Zen and protect yourself, but you've reached exhaustion, resentment, stress, overly criticizing yourself for not helping more, not having helped enough, not knowing why that person didn't come to you when they needed help. Um, yeah.
Well,
And exploit.
congratulations.
Oh,
That
thank
is
you.
amazing. And thank you for writing the book. Writing is no joke. It's difficult, but um, wow, 5 languages, awards, and I'm sure it's so rewarding for people to reach back out to you. I'm a self-described people pleaser and conflict avoider, and I'm 4 years into working on it. And just this week in my office, there was a situation. It was last week happened, and I took me a little while to figure out that I didn't like it. A couple more days to figure out what I was going to do about it. And then I sat down because I've got these steps that I tell everybody to do, if you're going to have a conversation at work. And I was going through these conflict steps and some nonviolent communication, and I realized I'm not in a conflict. I want to make a simple request because it's what I want. They weren't really doing anything wrong, but it was a request because it had impacted my working space. And I'm like, Mary, it has been almost 4 years on this journey, and you were finding it hard to make a very simple request. And I said, yes, and let's do it anyway. And I did it. And the person said, oh, yeah, sure. You know, it was just such I know that this is for me a lifelong journey since I spent 50 years one way. I'm going to be spending however much time I have left trying to do the other because I want a higher quality of life. I want more authentic relationships. I've got kids home for the summer and we're trying to do a lot of family things. And I said to one who I wasn't sure was on the plan, I said, okay, I'm not going to manage your emotions. If you don't like this plan, you're going to have to speak up. because whether or not anybody else needs to hear it, I need to let myself off the hook. And that's one of my
Yeah,
get arounds. Like, okay, I'm going to say this. I'm not managing your emotions. So we're going to go with this
lovely,
plan unless you say otherwise. So
marvelous. And isn't that a thing? So often the super helper syndrome, it's not in the book, and there needs to be two additional chapters. Okay, so maybe it's my next book. Responsibility. We take on responsibility. And I was making notes as you were talking earlier, and I'm glad actually, because I want to circle back to something you said. When you're empathic and you're tuning into the needs of others, you also not only begin to prioritize others' needs, because that suits your self-image of yourself as a nice person, therefore you should do that thing or be that thing, fix that thing for them. You take responsibility for them and their problems. So their problem suddenly feels like yours. And sometimes to the worst degree, and I have experienced this as well, their problem feels like my problem. And I take it on as seriously as it is my problem. And I will be worried about it as if it's my problem. And there we need the Zorba Zen. But noticing that you were taking responsibility for your child's emotional state, well, that's not your responsibility anymore. All you can do is guide them, you can be there for them, you can have conversations about it, but they're a young adult and there is no way you can be responsible for them at the moment. So I think that's really fascinating. And I think one of the things I'm interested in, if you don't mind of asking you about, is how when you're having a conversation to mediate or prevent a conflict situation from worsening, how much responsibility should we take? Because, and that the person you're advising, obviously, is the only person in that party of two or more. Because something came up for me when you were talking earlier. Often I feel it's really unfair that the empathic one, the emotionally intelligent person, has to do all the hard work. They are the ones having to be the bigger person, step up, analyze things, change who they are, accommodate, adapt their voice, adapt their style. We have to work so hard. And I'm always apologizing to my beautiful empathic coaching clients. Like, I'm so sorry that it falls on your shoulders to do this. That's
Mhm.
the only way you're going to get some resolution. That's the only way you're going to be able to sleep at night.
And I hear that too. Like, why do I have to be the bigger person? Right? People say that to me, like a mediation, like when you're doing coaching before they come together. And what I love about conflict resolution, and I specifically do workplace, but I think really all conflict resolution is that it's about first and foremost about personal empowerment. So the question is, who do I want to be, and what do I want, and what do I want around me? So if something is negatively impacting me, right? So I know there's something wrong. And so instead of waiting for them to get it together or them to figure it out, them to apologize, them to see the error of their way, I don't have to be in that position anymore. I can stop and say, okay, what is going on? What is bothering me? Finding very specifically what it is, why I'm having an emotional response, or what the emotional response is, what it is I actually want, noticing that I need to focus on a behavior, not a personality, because behaviors are things that we can look at.
Yeah.
I think the whole process is very empowering. And the question, why do I have to do this? Well, I'm going to live according to my values. And if I want particular boundaries and if I want things to go in a certain sort of way, then the wonderful news is that's up to me. I don't have to wait for
Yeah.
anybody else. I get to be the person I want to be. I get to address this thing because guess what? I want to address it. It doesn't matter if it bothers anybody else. It is bothering me. And also, though, sometimes I think when we de-escalate ourselves, we can right-size the problem. Um, I was looking at your website before we began, and you had this line about helping clients, and one of them was ruminating on things that don't matter. And I think that in conflict resolution, the biggest part I tell people it's the preparing. I mean, it's all about you. When the wonderful thing about conflict resolution is that I can really think about why is this bothering me? Is this an organizational issue? Is it a managerial issue? Is it an onboarding issue? And I think a lot of times at work, we can get caught in this loop because we don't know what to do. We don't know where to go. There's a problem, but we don't know what to do about it. And I think developing conflict resolution skills and having a coach or an ombuds or someone to help us along that process is that we can start to see more clearly what is the problem and therefore then the path forward. So we don't have to stay stuck. So I see it as very empowering. And why do I have to do this? Well, who do I want to be? What are my values? How do I want to be viewed as a professional? And what kind of professional do I want to be? So I get to speak up for myself. I get to let this go or address it, but I don't practice magical thinking. And I'm going to do that work. The only way through is through. So I'm going to decide to address it or not. But I find it actually wonderfully empowering.
Mm, lovely. Absolutely. And it's self-fulfilling as well, isn't it? The more you do it, the more you feel like, a client will come back a week or two later and say, was so much easier than I thought it was going to be. Or actually, they didn't, like you said, you were anticipating a response. We entertain magical thinking, or we entertain some kind of future foresight, where we assume we think we know how they're going to respond. Sometimes we do, but sometimes it surprises us. And sometimes stepping up and actually behaving in a different way changes, well, usually, the other person's role anyway, doesn't it? The dynamic changes. I also wrote down parent, adult, child. You must know about um, that concept as well. And I think that's it. We're working adult to adult, aren't we? And we're hoping that our the people that we're working with can get into adult mode and no longer feel like the child who is being bullied or controlled or criticized, no longer the parent being the one to bully or criticize or, nag, but actually adult to adult is really important. And taking that, as you say, it's empowering, taking that knowledge that actually I have the skills now to move forward and I can have those conversations without losing a sense of who I am, without changing into somebody else.
Yeah, and I also think like this adult to adult conversation, right? The dialogue is that's what a dialogue really is. It's not talking at somebody, but it is partnering and it is that curiosity and that authenticity that I'm I'm partnering with you. This is a problem for me, but I don't really know why you're doing what you're doing. I don't really know, I have an idea of what it is I want you to do. I want this to go away in some way, but it is that partnering with another person to actually hear the live person's story and what is actually going to work for them as you partner. But it also, I think, helps not take on somebody else's emotions, right? I'm going to decide what I'm going to do, and I'm going to let you have your emotional response. I'm going to let you partner with me. I'm going to let you be upset with me. That's you. All I can do is show up and be professional and be gracious and extend that olive branch and realize we're all works in process, right? And so, how can I partner? And I think absolutely what you said when I change my demeanor, and instead of saying that person is my office nemesis, but rather I'm going to have a conversation with another person to find a solution that works for us,
Mm.
that changes how I'm going to approach that other person. Therefore, they're more likely to change how they approach me.
Yeah, I love that. And that reminds me of an aspect of self-compassion
Mm.
that I bring to my work as well. And I'm sure it's in your work, if not overtly, then covertly. But it's like that honoring yourself, understanding that you're suffering. And, when you brought up earlier about, ruminating on something that isn't important, something that doesn't really matter, but understanding that that's not an opportunity to beat yourself up either. Just because you're ruminating or something doesn't mean you should be adding more criticism to that, but saying, how else can I speak to myself? What else can I do with the headspace that I've got right now? Especially if it's 3 a.m. in the morning and you're going over an argument or a conversation that has happened or may not even happen. We've all been there. So, and I was wondering about self-compassion and how, if at all, you bring that into your work, because sometimes to help diffuse the the power of the other person, the negative energy of the other person, even in not maybe not physically, not really in the room, but in the person's mind and my client's mind, to think about what are they suffering with, they will be suffering, and they are human, therefore they will be suffering in some way. They may not be aware of it, and it's not my responsibility to do anything about that, but to acknowledge that it's human
Mhm.
and that it's probably not that pleasant for them in the first place either. And it's probably not something, a situation or a conversation that they want to have either. Most of us are conflict avoidant. So I'm just curious if I can ask you
Yeah,
if self-compassion or compassion for others comes in to your work
absolutely.
too.
I think so many times by the time somebody realizes they're in conflict, of course, people are in different age, stages of development and how well they are in having difficult conversations. But for those of us who struggle with it, it can take a while to realize something's wrong. And then, sometimes it takes people a really long time if they're ever going to say anything. And so the longer you go, then the more you're likely to turn that other person into a cardboard cutout. They're a villain, right? And so
Mm.
you're not going to have a conversation with a villain. You're going to say things like they don't care about anybody but themselves. They don't care about me. They're not going to have an honest conversation with me. And so a part of realizing your own emotional response is starting to realize, okay, well, they are a person and they have an emotional response and they have a story about what's going on at work. And again, not to get it necessarily right, but to try to humanize them because we only
Mm.
have real dialogues with other human persons. If the other person's a villain, you're not there yet to be able to
Yeah,
actually have a conversation. Now, of course, we might need a third party, a facilitated conversation. There's so many different variables, but um, part of that is recognizing that they are a full person and they have a narrative, and almost everybody's the hero of their story. So they probably, believe it or not, don't think what they're doing is wrong. They have a story as to why that's the right thing at this time, given their information. Doesn't mean they're right, but it's to try to help
yeah,
understand so you can see them as a person to try to move forward with them.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, humanizing them.
So
Mm.
my last question for you. Oh, well, I have my last question. Before we get there, I'm very excited about this YouTube channel that you are starting. So can you tell us about your YouTube channel and what people can expect to find there?
Yeah, I'm really excited about it as well. It's it's called Powered by Empathy, as you might imagine it might be, because it's to do with all the work that I've ever done. And I don't know about you, but I have a very interesting relationship, as most people do, I think, with social media. And for a couple of years now, I've wanted to do this. I think the fact that I'm turning 50 in a few months' time is the rocket. Just help me just get that last push in. But ultimately, as I was, as I said earlier about I can't just help one coaching client, I need to write a book. Well, I can't just write one book. Okay, I need to write another book. Maybe that will happen at some point. Uh, but for now, it's a YouTube channel. It's a place for me to honor the people out there who haven't yet found me or and haven't yet found the solution or a step closer to the solution, who are empathic, kind, caring, overgiving, people pleasing, super helpers, any of the above or all of them, who ultimately are looking for some self belief for that king pole to be stronger. They are wanting to be, to know that they're not alone. And, to be given some reflection questions. So it's not a therapy, obviously, it's a YouTube channel, and I'm only going to be doing, 6 or 8 minute long uh, films. But the way I like to do things is like this, Mary. It's like in a conversation. So I'm faking conversations at the moment. I have invited my list, my email list, to write into me. So if anyone watching this and it's live, and come over to the YouTube channel, we'll be going live next week. Um, so come over and message me and say, here's my situation, and I'll respond to it. So I'm not giving psychotherapy, coaching, etc., but I'm just making that story come to life. And then offering reflective questions, and yes, some things that you might want to try and do to help shift how you feel about that at the moment. So it's I'm heading towards like a live radio call in. which is where I've done live radio calls and they're very exciting. But so I'm kind of faking it while I can in this setting with my lovely little plants that I've just bought to look nice.
That sounds wonderful. I mean, there's so many, I think that the people pleasers of the world, they get lost because they're doing all the work and they many have the belief that they don't deserve or have needs because they got to get to everybody else, right? So that one understanding of altruism is I got to help everybody before I get to myself. Well, you're never going to help everybody, so you're never going to get to yourself. So
No, exactly.
oh, I wish you so much luck on that, and I'd definitely go
Thank
over and
you.
check out that channel. So, my last question is, as you look into the future of the world of work, what do you think needs to happen so that not only will all people be treated with dignity and respect, but that people will thrive and flourish?
The answer. Okay. Can I take a couple of minutes to answer this question?
Yes, absolutely.
Lovely. Thank you. At the moment, as you may be aware, there's a beautiful movement towards compassionate leadership. And there's a movement of management consultants in the UK here. It's even been being embedded in some of the NHS trusts we've got here in the UK. And there's a lovely concept. There's a lot of research behind it. All the data shows us that if you are a compassionate leader yourself, you are drastically reduced chance of being burnt out or taking time off for sickness because you're also looking after yourself as part of being a compassionate leader. But mostly, of course, you're a brilliant, wonderful person for other people in your team. Your customers benefit, your business benefits, everybody is engaged, productive, happy to be there. Oh my goodness me, it's like Disney, we're in like a Disneyland of organizational culture where everybody wants to work there. However, I've seen a flaw in this. I've seen a flaw, and this is why the YouTube video as well, but this is why I'm talking to you now about empathy powered leaders. It's because uh, firstly, you can try and train people in compassion, but if they don't want to be passionate, I mean, hardly anyone ever said I want to be kinder. They usually say, no, I'm happy doing what I do. I meet my targets and I go home at the end of the day. Thanks for the salary. um, then you're wasting your money. If you're embedding a leadership program where you're trying to make people nicer, all the people nicer, you're wasting money because only a certain few are going to choose to be kinder. My money is that those people who choose to be kinder are already empathic. So this very much says find your empathic people, find your kind, caring, invisible supporters. Um, they are working hard. They are keeping everyone afloat. They are cohesive. They're already naturally inclusive. They already want to work in diverse situations. They love working um, in a multitude of different ways. They are also very capable. They are also tuned in to everybody. They're also noticing when people aren't quite plugged in at 100% and they're able to nip in the bud, potential stressors and issues around sickness or issues around conflict because they have the antennae to see what's really going on. All they need, however, so there are empathic people in your company, right? All they need is a bit of me. Well, the answer that I've got is a bit of self-belief, a bit of courage, and coupled with the right organizational culture that says, we value you. We see you now. We've never seen you before. We've mistaken your kindness for weakness. We've mistaken your niceness for a genteel, passive, nice to have in the team. We've not seen how much effort and energy you put into this project, this task, getting things done, the customers you serve, the extra mile you go. We don't know all of the outside work hours you put in, but we're really grateful and we want to see you and we want to see you as a role model for others. So we're about to change our organizational culture, and looks like this, and we need you to step in with us now so that we can co-create that. That's my vision of the world moving forward.
Oh, I love that so much. Yeah, I actually feel like we could go on for quite some time. I'm interested in the ethics of care, and it sounds as a really wonderful articulation of this overlooked resource that is in front of your nose. and yeah, the overlooked carers because they're just doing the business of the work. And many are not self-promoters for a variety of reasons. And so they don't ascend, and they're the ones that should be leading. Absolutely.
Yeah.
With
They're the
some
ones
help.
with the core skills.
Yeah.
They have the skills and they want to be. They want to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. You give any number of empathic people a sense of self-assuredness that they're not doing anything wrong. You reassure them that they know what their values, you help them identify their values and their strengths. You give them that king pole to help bolster their self-trust, and they'll fly if they want to. Yeah. And they'll happily role model and support others, which they already are. At the moment, they're too busy helping everyone else get up the ladder and are being forgotten about. But if you can raise them, you know, a little bit, then, they're willing to bring people up as well. So, yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for this. I think it's a movement. If you want to be the US cohort movement on empathic power, empathy powered leaders, Mary, then, let's partner.
Sounds fantastic. Well, Jess, thank you so much for your time. It's just been an absolute joy talking with you today.
Oh, it's been lovely. Thank you so much. It's such interesting work that you do. And thank you very much for inviting me and for giving me the time.
Absolutely. Take care.
Cheers.
Jess, thank you so much for this wonderful and lively conversation, the work that you are doing. I wish I would have read your book 4 years ago when I started this journey, but I'm going to get it and read it and I'll benefit from it. And watching your YouTube channel sounds fascinating. So thank you so much, Jess, for the work you're doing and for being on Conflict Managed. Conflict Managed is produced by third-party workplace conflict restoration services and hosted by me, Mary Brown. You can find us online at 3pconflictrestoration.com. Come back. We have new episodes every Tuesday, and you can watch this episode and see Jess's lovely plants and all of our hand gestures. Both of us use our hands quite a lot on YouTube. If you would please like and subscribe to whatever you are listening or watching this podcast, that is greatly appreciated. If you haven't had a chance to check out my book, How to Be Unprofessional at Work, Tips to Ensure Failure, it's 80 tips of what not to do and considers what to do instead to have a healthy work environment. And remember, conflict is normal and expected. Let's deal with it. Until next time, take care.